He's. I think there's a lot of discussion on the social media about this, and people pointed out different things. I think some of them do make sense. One thing he seems like very angry with China. He said that China hasn't provided any help to us, but that's not true. China sent a lot of aid, but the aid are for like civilians, like clothes and diapers and formula, those sort of thing. There are no weapons. He want weapons from China. I think that's the thing that angers him, probably among other things. I
Yeah, I
think.
mean, which is absurd.
Yeah,
I mean, it completely contradicts Chinese foreign policy.
yeah,
I mean, China is not providing weapons to Russia.
no,
China is
exactly.
not providing weapons to Ukraine.
Hmm.
So what is he complaining about?
Yeah, yeah.
China has an economic relationship with Russia,
Mhm.
and it has tried to maintain an economic relationship with Ukraine. It
Yeah.
is cheating both countries in the same way. Obviously, it has a strategic partnership with Russia.
Mhm.
All the world knows it.
Yeah,
But that has not meant that China has played any direct role in the conflict in Ukraine at all. I was reading, by the way, Ukrainian commentator, an important military commentator, discussing drones and the kind of drones that each side uses. And he says the Russians get two-thirds of their technology from China, from the civilian Chinese industry. And we get all of ours from China too. We both rely on Chinese drone technology to keep our drones working. So, I
yeah.
mean, there you have it.
Yes, that's another thing that people are talking about, that China, doesn't sell military drones to anybody.
No,
The civilian drones is open to everyone.
absolutely.
Ukraine buys that too. It's not just Russian. And then they do some
Exactly.
changes with their civilian
Yeah,
ones. Well, that's something China cannot control. Okay.
absolutely. Well,
So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And the Chinese government is always very measured. So this is what the Chinese government says. China is open to constructive role in this regard, and China has always acted openly and above board on Ukraine crisis, adhering to an objective and a fair stance, and all parties are well aware of this. So even though I think it's measured, but China is a little bit irritated. You can hear, all parties, that's
Yeah.
including Ukraine. You know that, right? Is that kind of a
Yeah.
little bit irritated?
They are irritated, got every right to be, because Zelensky, a year, 2 years ago, he was agreeing. He was saying this. He too was saying this, that China had an open, transparent role.
Mhm.
I mean, he was going out of his way to have good relations with China. I can remember when was it he telephoned Xi Jinping at one
Uh-huh,
point,
yeah,
and the
yeah,
Americans were very annoyed about it. By
about
the
that.
way, I remember.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was reaching out to the Chinese, and then of course, as I said, gradually, as he's projected himself as the great champion of the West,
Mhm.
as he's become increasingly influenced by his friends in the Baltic states and in all
Yeah.
of those places, as he's wanted to make friends with people like Senator Graham in the United States, he's
Mhm.
taken an ever more extreme anti China stance. To repeat again, if China did all the things that the West claims
Mhm.
in Ukraine, in the conflict would now be over and
Mhm.
Russia would have won. It's as simple as that. Anybody who doesn't know that or doesn't understand that is a fool.
And the other thing is that somebody also pointed out that China has been buying agricultural products from Ukraine.
Yeah,
Europeans doesn't. They
yeah,
protected their own agriculture
yeah,
market.
yeah.
So actually, they don't buy. They're banned from
Yes,
buying the Ukrainian agriculture products. China is the one who's
co-
buying. So
correct.
so
So
what's their?
again, I mean, it's what's called biting the hand that feeds you, because China is providing trade and is trying to keep some parts of the Ukrainian economy still functioning.
Mhm.
But and as I said, China is tried to fulfill
Mhm.
a mediation role. Li Hui,
Yeah,
Li,
uh-huh.
yeah, I mean he's
Envoy.
tried. He's been to Kiev. He wasn't treated very kindly there, properly there, in my opinion. But China has made efforts.
Yeah.
We see where it's all gone. Um, but this is a lens. This is. I'm sorry to say this. This is. I mean, Ukraine is very let down by the quality of its leader. Many Ukrainians say this too, by the way. Um, um, Another leader would avoid talking about China. in this way. And it's not just the Chinese who are irritated by Zelensky. Prime Minister Modi of India doesn't like him. President Lula of Brazil was infuriated when he agreed to meet Zelensky at a G7 meeting, which both of them were invited to, and Zelensky didn't turn up to the meeting. MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, is now not to like Zelensky very much either. I mean, he has this way which offends people, except it must be said in Europe.
In general, I must say, part of the reason China trying to be as neutral as possible is before, actually, I think China and Ukraine always had a pretty good relationship.
They
I think it's changed also in 2014, that after the Maidan coup, isn't it? It's getting
Yeah,
worse.
it's true. I mean, it started to deteriorate afterwards, but even afterwards, right up until the very start of the special military operation, China was a big investor in
Yeah.
Ukraine.
Mhm.
It wanted to invest, I remember, in the Zaporozhye um, gas turbine plant. The United States didn't want that, and I remember that they took steps to prevent it happening. Um, um, China always strove to be on good terms with Ukraine. But I'm going to say something, and I hope now, I mean, I'm not telling Chinese people about their own foreign policy, but my own sense of China is that anyway, it doesn't like to get involved in other people's quarrels. So I mean, it's if the Russians and the China and the Ukrainians have issues with each other, the Chinese instinct is to say, well, this isn't our concern. We would prefer countries to get on with each other. We would like them to mediate if they want us to help to mediate between them. But it's not our business to pick sides.
Yeah.
I think that is very much the tradition of Chinese foreign policy altogether.
And China doesn't want, the same is true that China doesn't want other countries to tell China what to do, interfere with China's domestic policies. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
So China
Exactly.
consistent, right? Don't bother
Uh,
me. I'm not bothering you either, right? So
correct.
it's all taking
Correct.
care of each other's business
Correct.
themselves.
Correct. And I think this is a very, very much part of China's foreign policy, in fact, general policy
Uh-huh.
DNA. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I hope Chinese people don't take it amiss that I say that. But I mean, I find Chinese stance relative to the war in Ukraine completely consistent
Mhm.
in terms of Chinese foreign policy
Yeah.
as a whole.
Yeah. 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 It is consistent, and you're absolutely right. China in general wants to trade with
Yeah.
everyone, right?
Everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody, but
Yeah.
doesn't want to get interfere, into domestic policies of any country. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
yeah. The West doesn't seem to understand that. They somehow believe
No,
China is taking side. China doesn't want to take side.
correct.
So-
Correct. The extraordinary thing is the Russians understand it.
yeah,
I
uh-huh,
mean, you could argue. I mean, the Russians ought to be annoyed. I mean, they.
mhm,
I
yeah,
mean, if
mhm,
they applied Western type thinking,
yeah,
they could say to the Chinese, "Look, you're our strategic partner. Why
mhm,
are you still trading with
yeah,
Ukraine? Why are you still, talking to these people in
mhm,
the way that you are?" The Russians never do that.
yeah,
I mean, they've learnt enough. They've understood China well enough to know that that wouldn't be welcome there,
mhm,
and they work very hard on their side to try to understand China's foreign policy and what it's about. And on the contrary, they show an understanding and appreciation of it. The Russians understand it. The West never does. By the way, just before I started this program, I was reading an utterly paranoid article. I'm sorry, there's many of these paranoid articles about China in the British media, talking about Ukraine, talking about China's infiltration of Britain. I mean, crazy stuff by the former the former leader of the Conservative Party, Ian Duncan Smith, who is somebody whose views about China are just crazy. But he is fairly typical.
no,
Either you're with us
uh-huh,
Either you're 100% with us
Uh-huh.
or you're 100% against
Against,
us.
yeah.
And that's the attitude that these people have.
That's yeah, I noticed that too. You know, George W. Bush said that, right? You either
Yeah,
agree, with us or against us. So you have to take
yeah.
side, even though
You have to
I
take
actually
sides.
I actually think a majority of the countries don't want to take side. It's not just
No,
China doesn't want. I think a majority
no,
of people don't want to get involved in,
exactly.
yeah. And honestly, I actually do think China is correct to believe that if nobody is involved in these things, they somehow will find ways resolve themselves. I
Yes.
mean, if you look at like Gaza, there's also criticism for China not to helping the Palestinians enough.
Yeah.
Now, China's view is if nobody, the United States in particular, if the United States is not in there to mess things up, there will be a solution. They will find a solution. I actually
Correct.
think that's correct. Yeah.
They are absolutely correct.
Mhm.
Again, I mean, I speak now as a person who studied much mediation and things of this kind. The one way to aggravate any kind of dispute
Hmm.
is when self-interested third parties
Yeah.
involve themselves in it. I mean, that absolutely guarantees that any dispute uh, will then
Yeah.
develop into an all-out conflict and then will become much more difficult to resolve.
Mhm.
This is absolutely right. I mean, it is true in life and it is true in the world of diplomacy as well.
Yeah. And the Ukraine and the Russian, if not the NATO was so heavily involved, if not the US has been, was under Biden,
Yes.
was, yeah, they would have resolved it probably in this 2022, right? They had this uh, Turkey meeting that they would probably have resolved that.
Well,
Yeah.
they would have resolved it. I
Hmm.
mean, the document had been initialed.
Hmm.
Zelensky had made a speech in which he said that he supported it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the the British and the Americans came, and they said no. That meant that the conflict continued, with the results we all see.
The South Korea president, Lee Jae-myung, he visited the U.S. Now, several things. One is the Korean media was very unhappy about it because they compared how he was received with how Putin was received. Now, I do think there's a little bit stretch to compare the two, but okay, that they don't like the optics of it.
Yeah.
What is your view? What do you think that they both sides, U.S. and the South Korea, want to get out of this?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the South Koreans expecting that they would be treated in the same way as the leader of a superpower, which is of course Russia, is expecting rather a lot. I have to say this, but against that, I mean, I think the South Koreans perhaps don't quite fully understand two things about the United States. Firstly, the United States takes South Korea completely for granted. As far as the Americans are concerned, South Korea is a vassal state. The Americans don't have to really do very much because the job of the South Koreans is to do as they're told and to come to the imperial capital and to be, received by the emperor and to, prostrate themselves before him and to take whatever instructions the emperor, the president of the United States, hands down to them. That is, I think, very much the American view. It's not something the Americans would say, perhaps even to each other, but it's what deep down they all think. The second is that I think Donald Trump doesn't like South Korea very much because, as far as he's concerned, South Korea is a country that runs a big trade surplus with the United States, that produces all the various things that the United States once produced. But now South Korea does it better. So the Americans used to make televisions. The South Koreans make better televisions. The South Koreans make, microchips. The Americans don't. All of those kind of things. So I don't think he likes South Korea very much. I don't think Donald Trump has ever really felt very comfortable in Asia altogether, if I have to say.
They did mention that he seems to want to meet Kim Jong Un again.
Yes,
Yeah, okay, we will see whether that happens, but it's
yes,
interesting. Okay.
yes.